That Thursday morning, when I rushed to Riverside Medical Center to sign what I thought were organ donation papers for my dying brother, I believed I was honoring his final wishes. Have you ever had that moment when something feels desperately wrong, but everyone around you is pushing you forward, telling you there's no time to think? That's exactly where I found myself, standing in a sterile hospital corridor with a clipboard in my hands and my entire world falling apart. My name is Margaret, and I'm 63 years old. I've lived through enough to know when something doesn't smell right, but grief has a way of clouding even the sharpest instincts. My brother David had been in a terrible car accident just 18 hours earlier. The call came at 3 in the morning from his wife, Linda. "Margaret, you need to come now," she'd said, her voice strangely flat. "David's been in an accident. They're saying he might not make it. We need to make decisions." I'd thrown on the first clothes I could find and driven through the empty Toronto streets, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. David wasn't just my brother. He was my best friend, the person who'd pulled me through the darkest period of my life when my husband passed away 5 years ago. The thought of losing him felt like losing my last anchor to the world. When I arrived at the hospital, Linda met me in the lobby. She looked composed, almost too composed for someone whose husband was supposedly dying. Her makeup was perfect, her clothes pressed. I remember thinking that was odd, but I pushed the thought away. People handle shock differently, I told myself. "Where is he?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "ICU, 4th floor. But Margaret, we need to talk first." She guided me to a quiet corner of the waiting room. "The doctors have been very clear. David has a severe traumatic brain injury. He's on life support, but there's no brain activity. They've done all the tests." The words hit me like physical blows. No brain activity, life support. My strong, vibrant brother who'd helped me plant my garden just last week was now. "They're recommending we consider organ donation," Linda continued, her voice gentle but insistent. "David always talked about wanting to help people. This is his chance to save lives, Margaret. Multiple lives. But we need to decide quickly. The organs are only viable for a short window." I felt numb. "Can I see him first?" "Of course, but the paperwork takes time to process. If we sign now, you can sit with him afterward. The transplant coordinator is waiting." "Margaret, I know this is awful, but David would want this." "You know he would." Something in her urgency bothered me, but grief was wrapping around my brain like fog. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was the last good thing we could do for David, turning his tragedy into hope for someone else. Linda led me to a small office where a woman in business attire sat behind a desk. Not a doctor, not a nurse, just someone with a stack of forms and a sympathetic smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm so sorry for your loss," the woman said. "I'm Cheryl from the transplant coordination team. We need to move quickly to preserve your brother's organs for donation. As his next of kin and medical power of attorney holder, you need to sign these consent forms." "Wait," I said, my brain trying to catch up. "Linda said she's his wife. Wouldn't she be the one to sign?" Cheryl glanced at Linda, and something passed between them. A look I couldn't quite read. "There was a small issue with the documentation," Cheryl explained smoothly. "Mr. Thornton had recently updated his medical directive, naming you as his primary decision-maker. It's all legal and proper, but it does mean we need your signature specifically." That made no sense. David had never mentioned changing his medical directive. He and Linda had been married for 8 years. Why would he suddenly name me instead of his wife? "I don't remember David telling me about this," I said slowly. "He filed it 2 weeks ago," Cheryl said, sliding a document across the desk. "Here's the copy. You can see his signature right here." I looked at the paper. It did look like David's signature, but something about it felt off. The D in David was slightly different from how he usually wrote it. David had terrible handwriting, but he always made that D with a distinctive loop. This one was straighter. "I'd like to see him first," I said, standing up, "before I sign anything." Linda's hand shot out and gripped my arm. Her fingers dug in harder than necessary. "Margaret, please. Every minute we wait, those organs become less viable. There are people on transplant lists dying right now, children waiting for kidneys, a young mother who needs a liver. Don't you want David's death to mean something?" The emotional manipulation was obvious, but it was working. Guilt crashed over me. What kind of person was I, delaying when people's lives hung in the balance? I reached for the pen. That's when I heard it. A voice, barely above a whisper, speaking from the doorway behind me. "Wait, 24 hours. I beg you, just wait." I turned to see an elderly man in a white coat standing in the hallway. He must have been in his 70s, with silver hair and deep lines around his eyes that spoke of decades in medicine. His name tag read Dr. Vijay Patel. But what struck me most was the expression on his face. He looked frightened. "Excuse me, who are you?" Cheryl demanded, standing up abruptly. "Dr. Patel, Neurology Department," he said quietly, his eyes locked on mine. "I've been observing Mr. Thornton's case. Mrs. Morrison, I strongly advise you to wait before signing any irreversible documents. 24 hours. That's all I'm asking." "Dr. Patel, this is inappropriate," Linda said sharply. "The medical team has already made their assessment. David is brain dead. The tests were conclusive." "Were they?" Dr. Patel asked, still looking at me. "Mrs. Morrison, your brother suffered a diffuse axonal injury. I've seen similar cases recover brain function after 36 to 48 hours. The swelling needs time to reduce. If you donate his organs now, you'll never know if he might have woken up." My heart lurched. He could wake up? "Dr. Patel is retired," Cheryl interjected quickly. "He's not part of the active treatment team. The attending physicians have made their determination based on current medical standards." "I may be semi-retired, but I still have privileges here," Dr. Patel said firmly. "And I'm telling you that rushing this decision is medically questionable and ethically concerning. Mrs. Morrison deserves time to process and verify the information she's being given." Linda's face had gone red. "This is outrageous. Margaret, this man is interfering with David's wishes. We need to follow the proper protocols." But something had shifted in me. That fog of grief was lifting, and beneath it, my instincts were screaming. Why was everyone so desperate for me to sign right now? Why had Linda brought me straight to this office instead of to see David first? And why did a doctor I'd never met look so worried? "I want to see my brother," I said, putting the pen down. "Now." Margaret Linda started. "Now," I repeated, my voice harder than I'd ever used with her. "I'm not signing anything until I see David with my own eyes and talk to his actual doctors." Cheryl and Linda exchanged a glance. I saw panic flash across Linda's face for just a second before she composed herself. "Of course," Linda said through gritted teeth. "Let's go see him." Dr. Patel followed us to the ICU, staying a respectful distance behind, but clearly not leaving. When we reached David's room, my breath caught in my throat. My strong, healthy brother lay motionless, tubes and wires connecting him to various machines. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound. But as I approached his bedside, I noticed something. His color was good. His chest rose and fell with the ventilator, but it didn't look like the labored breathing of someone dying. And when I took his hand, it was warm, the fingers flexible, not the cooling rigidity I'd felt when my husband passed away. "He looks stable," I said. "The machines are keeping him alive," Linda said quickly. "But Margaret, there's no consciousness, no brain activity. He's essentially gone." I looked at the monitors. I didn't understand all of them, but I could read basic vital signs. Blood pressure, normal. Heart rate, steady. Oxygen saturation, 98%. These weren't the numbers of someone at death's door. "When were the brain activity tests done?" I asked. "Last night." "Around midnight," Linda said. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was now 10 in the morning. That meant David had been injured less than 24 hours ago, and they'd done the brain death tests within hours of his admission. "Isn't that unusually fast?" I asked. "Don't these things take time to assess?" Linda's jaw tightened. The trauma team was very thorough. Dr. Patel cleared his throat from the doorway. "Mrs. Morrison, might I speak with you privately for a moment?" "In the hall." Linda stepped between us. "Anything you need to say can be said in front of me. I'm David's wife." "Mrs. Thornton, I believe Mrs. Morrison has the right to speak with any physician she chooses," Dr. Patel said calmly. "Unless you're trying to prevent her from getting a second medical opinion." The challenge hung in the air. Linda's face went through several emotions before settling on forced pleasantness. Of course not. Margaret, take all the time you need. I'll be right here with David. I followed Dr. Patel into the hallway, my heart pounding. As soon as we were out of earshot, he turned to me with grave eyes. Mrs. Morrison, I'm going to be very direct with you because I don't think we have much time. I've been a neurologist for 42 years, and what I witnessed this morning deeply concerns me. I happened to be consulting on another case when I overheard the conversation between your sister-in-law and the transplant coordinator. The urgency, the pressure tactics, the rush to secure consent before you could see your brother or speak with his treating physicians, none of this is standard protocol. What are you saying? I whispered. I took the liberty of reviewing your brother's medical records this morning. The so-called brain death tests, they were incomplete and improperly performed. The attending physician who supposedly signed off on them wasn't even in the hospital at the time. The signature on the medical directive naming you as decision-maker was filed 2 weeks ago, but the witness signatures are from hospital administrative staff, not neutral parties as required by law. My stomach dropped. Linda forged it? I can't prove that yet, but something is very wrong here. I've also been practicing medicine long enough to recognize when someone is being pressured to make a decision that primarily benefits others, not the patient. Mrs. Morrison, I think someone wants your brother's organs, and they're willing to cut corners to get them. But why? Linda loves David. Why would she? I couldn't even finish the sentence. I don't know the why, Dr. Patel said gently, but I do know this. Your brother is not brain dead. His reflexes are present. His EEG this morning showed slow wave activity consistent with deep sedation and swelling, not absence of brain function. He may have been over-sedated to suppress those reflexes during the evaluation. With proper time and treatment, he has a reasonable chance of recovery. I felt like I was going to be sick. What do I do? Don't sign anything. Demand a second opinion from a neurologist not affiliated with the transplant program. I've already put in a call to Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the best neurologists in Ontario. She's driving in from Hamilton and should be here in an hour. Insist that no procedures move forward until she's evaluated David. And Mrs. Morrison? He paused, his voice dropping even lower. Be very careful around your sister-in-law. I may be wrong about all of this, but if I'm right, she's desperate. Desperate people do dangerous things. I returned to David's room with my mind reeling. Linda looked up as I entered, her expression carefully neutral. Everything okay? She asked. I've decided to wait, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I want another neurologist to evaluate David before we make any final decisions. Linda's face went very still. Margaret, that's not necessary. The tests have been done. Then another set of tests won't hurt, I replied, moving to stand beside David's bed. If he's truly brain dead, nothing will change. But Dr. Patel raised some valid concerns, and I need to be absolutely certain before I consent to organ donation. Dr. Patel is a meddling old fool who should have retired years ago, Linda snapped, her careful composure finally cracking. He has no right to interfere with our family decisions. He's looking out for David's best interests, I said quietly, which is more than I can say for some people. Linda's eyes went cold. What's that supposed to mean? It means I want to know why you're in such a hurry to harvest my brother's organs. It means I want to know why the medical directive was changed 2 weeks ago without David telling me. It means I want to know why you look more annoyed than grieving right now. Linda stood up slowly. When she spoke, her voice was low and dangerous. You have no idea what you're doing, Margaret. There are things in play here that are bigger than your sentimental attachment to your brother. Sign the papers, let David's death serve a purpose, and walk away. That's the smart choice. Are you threatening me? I asked, shocked. I'm giving you advice. The same advice I'd give anyone who is about to make a very costly mistake. Sometimes people who ask too many questions find themselves facing legal complications, harassment charges, claims of interference with medical care. These things can get very ugly, and you're a woman of limited means. Can you afford a legal battle, Margaret? My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to meet her gaze. I'm not going anywhere, Linda. And I'm not signing anything until I know the truth about what's happening to my brother. Linda's expression shifted from anger to something calculating. Fine, stay, sit with him. But when nothing changes in 24 hours, when the next set of tests confirms what we already know, you'll sign. And Margaret? She leaned in close. You should know that David and I were having problems. Serious problems. He'd been talking about divorce. Did he mention that to you? She hadn't. The information hit me like a slap. David always told me everything, or so I'd thought. Had he been keeping secrets? We have a life insurance policy, Linda continued, her voice smooth now. $2 million. In the event of his death, I'm the beneficiary. But if David is declared brain dead and kept on life support indefinitely, I get nothing. The medical bills pile up, the insurance company stalls, and I'm left with debts and legal fees. Organ donation allows for a clean, documented death. Everyone wins. The people on transplant lists get their organs, I get to move on with my life, and David's suffering ends. The only person causing problems here is you. So this is about money, I said, my voice hollow. This is about being practical. You've always been naive, Margaret. You think love and good intentions solve everything. They don't. David made choices that put us in a difficult financial position. He was about to lose his business. We owe $300,000 to some very impatient creditors. His death, properly managed, solves all of that. His life, prolonged in a vegetative state, destroys me financially and leaves him trapped in a body that can't function. Tell me which option is actually more compassionate. I stared at her, seeing clearly for the first time who she really was. Not the warm, caring woman who'd become part of our family 8 years ago. Someone else entirely. Someone capable of cold calculation when her own interests were at stake. Get out, I said quietly. Excuse me? Get out of this room. I'm his next of kin, according to that directive you were so eager for me to sign. I'm making a medical decision right now, and that decision is that you are not allowed near him. Security can escort you out if necessary. Linda's face went purple with rage. You can't. I can. And I am. Leave. Now. For a moment, I thought she might physically attack me. Her hands clenched into fists, and she took a step forward. Then she seemed to remember where we were, in a hospital full of witnesses and cameras. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, but not before turning back to hiss one final warning. You're going to regret this, Margaret. I promise you that. The door slammed behind her, and I sank into the chair beside David's bed, my legs no longer able to support me. I took his hand again, studying his face. Was there some flicker of awareness beneath those closed eyelids? Some part of him that knew I was here, fighting for him? Hold on, I whispered. Just hold on, David. Help is coming. Dr. Patel appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, his expression troubled. I heard raised voices. Are you all right? Linda just admitted she wants David dead for the insurance money, I said, my voice shaking. She's $300,000 in debt. She said they were getting divorced. Dr. Patel, she's going to fight me on this. Then we need to move quickly. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling hospital security and requesting they flag Mrs. Thornton's access to this floor. I'm also documenting everything we've discussed. Mrs. Morrison, I need you to be very careful. If Mrs. Thornton is as desperate as she seems, she might try to access your brother's medical care through other means. Stay with him. Don't leave him alone. But I can't stay awake forever. I haven't slept since. I'll arrange for a private duty nurse, someone I trust. She'll stay in this room around the clock until we sort this out. He squeezed my shoulder. You did the right thing, speaking up. Many people would have signed those papers out of guilt or confusion. Your brother is lucky to have you. After he left, I sat there in the quiet, watching the monitors, listening to the steady rhythm of David's breathing. My mind kept replaying Linda's words. He was going to lose his business. They owed money. She needed him dead. How had I missed all of this? How had David hidden such massive problems from me? Or had Linda been lying, adding false details to justify what was essentially murder? I didn't know what to believe anymore. Around noon, Dr. Patel returned with a woman he introduced as Nurse Patricia. She was in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Patricia has been with me for 20 years," Dr. Patel explained. "I trust her completely. She'll stay with your brother while you take breaks. No one enters this room without her verification. No medications are administered without her checking them against the official orders. If anyone tries to pressure her or circumvent protocol, she'll alert security immediately." "Thank you," I said, meaning it with everything I had. Dr. Chen arrived shortly after 1 o'clock. She was younger than I expected, probably in her early 40s, but the way Dr. Patel greeted her made it clear she was highly respected. She spent over an hour examining David, reviewing his scans, and running tests I didn't understand. Finally, she emerged from the room with a grim expression. "Mrs. Morrison, Dr. Patel was right to call me. Your brother is not brain dead, not even close. He has a significant brain injury, yes, but he's showing clear signs of brainstem function and some higher cortical activity. The tests that were supposedly performed last night were either fabricated or so poorly executed as to be meaningless. Someone wanted him declared dead, and they cut corners to make it happen." "Can he recover?" I asked, afraid of the answer. "Honestly, it's too early to say for certain. Traumatic brain injuries are unpredictable. But I've seen patients with worse injuries than this wake up and eventually return to normal lives. Others never regain consciousness. The key point is that he deserves the chance to find out. Removing him from life support now, or harvesting his organs, would be killing a man who still has brain function. It would be murder." The word hung in the air. Murder. "I'm reporting this to the Hospital Ethics Board and the Medical Licensing Board immediately," Dr. Chen continued. "Someone in this hospital either made a catastrophic error in judgment or actively participated in a scheme to prematurely declare your brother dead. Either way, it needs to be investigated. I'm also getting the police involved. If what you've told Dr. Patel about the forged documents and financial motives is accurate, this is attempted fraud at minimum, possibly attempted murder." Everything moved very quickly after that. Hospital administration arrived, looking concerned and defensive. Police officers took my statement. I showed them the text messages from Linda that morning, the time she'd called, everything I could think of that might help. They interviewed hospital staff. Someone in medical records admitted that Linda had been unusually persistent about accessing David's file, asking detailed questions about organ donation procedures. The transplant coordinator, Cheryl, suddenly claimed she'd been misled about the urgency of the situation, though her explanations sounded rehearsed. Through it all, I stayed by David's side. Patricia proved to be not just a competent nurse, but a fierce guardian. When a doctor I didn't recognize tried to enter the room around 6 that evening, she physically blocked the door and demanded to see his credentials and orders. Turned out he wasn't David's doctor at all, just someone who'd been asked to check on things by hospital administration. Patricia sent him away with a sharp reprimand about proper chain of command. The first night was the longest of my life. I dozed in the chair beside David's bed, jerking awake at every sound, convinced Linda would somehow slip past security and finish what she'd started. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from her, alternating between pleading and threatening. I blocked her number. 24 hours after I'd first arrived at the hospital, Dr. Chen did another full evaluation. "His brain swelling is going down," she reported. "That's excellent news. His reflexes are becoming more robust. I'm cautiously optimistic." 48 hours in, something changed. I was dozing in the chair when I felt movement. My eyes snapped open to see David's fingers twitching in my hand. Just a small movement, but definitely purposeful, not a random spasm. "David?" I whispered. "Can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Patricia hit the call button and Dr. Chen came running. She performed test after test, her expression growing more excited with each one. "He's emerging from the coma," she said. "This is exactly what we hoped for. Talk to him, Mrs. Morrison. Let him hear your voice." I talked for hours, about everything and nothing. About the garden we'd planted, about the terrible coffee in the hospital cafeteria, about how terrified I'd been. And gradually, incrementally, David came back. His eyes opened on the third day. He couldn't speak because of the ventilator, but his eyes found mine, and I saw recognition there. Tears streamed down my face as I gripped his hand. "Welcome back," I whispered. "You scared the hell out of me." Dr. Chen removed the ventilator the next morning. David's voice was raspy and weak, but hearing it was the sweetest sound I'd ever known. "Margaret," he croaked. "What happened?" "Car accident," I said. "You've been unconscious for 4 days, but you're going to be okay now. You're going to be fine." "Linda?" he asked, and something dark passed over his face. "We need to talk about Linda," I said carefully. "But first, you need to rest. There's time for everything else later." But David shook his head stubbornly. "No, now. I remember. Before the accident. We were fighting. I told her I knew. His breathing was labored, and Dr. Chen moved to check his vitals, but he waved her off. I found the bank statements. She'd been stealing from my business. $300,000. I confronted her. She said she'd fix it, but I said I was going to the police. She was so angry. "Margaret, I remember. We were in the car. She was driving. I was yelling. And then she swerved. On purpose. Into the guardrail. My side of the car took the impact." My blood went cold. "David, are you saying Linda caused the accident deliberately?" "I don't know," he said, tears forming in his eyes. "Maybe. I keep seeing her face right before we hit. She looked determined. Or maybe I'm confused. The memories are jumbled. But Margaret, she was stealing from me. I have proof. In my home office, there's a safe behind the bookshelf. The combination is our mother's birthday. Inside, there's a flash drive with all the evidence. Bank records, forged checks, everything. I was planning to go to the police the next day. And then the accident happened. I called Detective Wilson, the officer who'd taken my statement 2 days earlier. He arrived within the hour, and David repeated everything he'd told me. The detective's expression grew darker with each revelation. "Mr. Thornton, do you consent to us searching your home office and retrieving this evidence?" "Yes," David said. "Whatever you need." They found the flash drive exactly where David said it would be. The evidence was damning. Linda had been systematically embezzling from David's construction business for over 2 years, funneling money into offshore accounts. But it wasn't just theft. The investigation revealed she'd been working with someone at Riverside Medical Center. The hospital's director of operations, a man named Gerald Hoffman, had been running an organ trafficking scheme. The way it worked was sickening. Hoffman would identify patients with good organ matches who were in vulnerable positions, usually people without strong family networks or whose families were easily pressured. He'd falsify or rush brain death declarations, then push for quick organ donations. But instead of the organs going to legitimate transplant recipients, they'd be sold on the black market to wealthy patients who didn't want to wait on official lists. The profits were staggering, hundreds of thousands of dollars per harvest. Linda had gotten involved with Hoffman through gambling debts. She owed money to dangerous people, and Hoffman offered her a way out. Provide David as an unwilling donor, and she'd get $2 million from the insurance, plus a cut of the organ sale profits. Nearly $3 million total, enough to clear her debts and set her up for life. The forged medical directive naming me as decision-maker had been a stroke of evil genius. Linda knew I'd never met Hoffman or Cheryl, the corrupt transplant coordinator. She knew I'd be overwhelmed with grief, making me an easier target than David's parents, who lived overseas and couldn't arrive for days. And the papers technically gave me authority, which meant Linda could claim she was just deferring to my decision if anything went wrong. Plausible deniability. But she hadn't counted on Dr. Patel. He'd been semi-retired, only coming in occasionally to consult on complex cases. But he'd happened to be in the hospital that morning, and he'd noticed inconsistencies in David's case file. He'd seen this kind of thing before, years ago, when a nurse had been caught euthanizing patients for inheritance money. He recognized the warning signs and decided to speak up, even though it meant going against hospital administrators who outranked him. The arrests happened fast. Linda was taken into custody first, charged with attempted murder, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. She tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, that she just wanted to honor David's wishes, but the evidence was overwhelming. The flash drive, the forged documents, phone records showing dozens of calls between her and Hoffman in the weeks before the accident, text messages discussing timing and maximizing the payout. Hoffman and Cheryl were arrested the same day. The investigation expanded to reveal they'd successfully trafficked organs from at least 7 other patients over the past 3 years. 7 people who might have recovered, who might have lived, but who'd been declared dead prematurely and harvested for profit. 7 families who'd been told their loved ones' deaths were serving a greater good, never knowing the truth. The scandal rocked the hospital. Riverside Medical Center's CEO resigned. New protocols were put in place nationwide about brain death declarations and organ donation consent. Dr. Patel was hailed as a hero, though he brushed off the attention, saying he'd just done what any decent doctor should do. David's recovery was slow but steady. The traumatic brain injury left him with some memory issues and headaches, but Dr. Chen said these would likely improve with time. He'd need physical therapy and cognitive rehabilitation, but he was alive. He was himself. He could still laugh at my terrible jokes and argue with me about whose turn it was to pick the restaurant when I brought him food from outside the hospital. The legal proceedings took months. Linda's trial was straightforward. The evidence was overwhelming, and her defense fell apart quickly. She was sentenced to 25 years for attempted murder and insurance fraud. Hoffman got 30 years for organ trafficking, fraud, and his role in 7 deaths. Cheryl took a plea deal and got 15 years in exchange for testifying against the others. David filed for divorce while he was still in the hospital. It was finalized 3 months later. Linda didn't contest it, probably hoping cooperation might reduce her sentence. It didn't. One evening, about 6 months after everything happened, David and I sat on my back porch watching the sunset. He was doing remarkably well, back to work part-time and rebuilding his business. The financial losses from Linda's theft were significant, but he was managing, and several of his old clients had returned once they heard what had happened. "I still can't believe I married someone capable of that," David said quietly. "How did I miss it? How did I not see who she really was?" "Because people like Linda are good at hiding it," I replied. "They show you what you want to see until they don't need to anymore. It's not your fault." "I keep thinking about Dr. Patel," he said. "About how if he hadn't been there that specific morning, if he hadn't decided to speak up, I'd be dead. You would have signed those papers thinking you were doing the right thing. Linda would have gotten away with it. Those organs traffickers would still be operating. But he was there," I said firmly. "And you're not dead. You're here, eating my cooking and complaining that I put too much garlic in the pasta." He smiled, but it faded quickly. "Margaret, I need to tell you something. About that morning, in the car with Linda. I remember it more clearly now. We were fighting, and I said I was going to the police. She grabbed the wheel and yanked it hard to the right, straight at the guardrail. She looked at me and she said, 'If I can't have the money, nobody can.' Then impact. I remember thinking this was it. I was going to die. And then nothing, until I woke up in the hospital and heard your voice." "You remember clearly that she did it on purpose?" I asked. "Yes. It wasn't an accident, Margaret. It was attempted murder. I need to tell the police, add it to the charges. She can't get parole someday and come after me again. I need her locked up for as long as possible." We called Detective Wilson the next morning. David's testimony about Linda deliberately causing the crash added additional charges. Her sentence was extended to 33 years. She'd be in her 70s before she was eligible for parole. Through all of this, Dr. Patel remained a quiet constant in our lives. He'd officially retired now, saying the scandal had reminded him he was too old for hospital politics. But he'd call occasionally to check on David's progress, and we'd have dinner together every few weeks. One evening, over curry at his favorite Indian restaurant, I asked him the question that had been bothering me. "Dr. Patel, why did you speak up that morning? You barely knew us. You could have just walked past that office, minded your own business. Why risk it?" He was quiet for a long moment, his weathered hands wrapped around his teacup. Finally, he spoke. 40 years ago, I was a young doctor in Mumbai. I was ambitious, focused on my career, not wanting to make waves. One day, I noticed a senior surgeon making errors. Small ones at first, then bigger. I suspected he was drinking before surgeries. But he was powerful, well-connected. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was just my imagination. He paused, his eyes distant with old pain. A month later, that surgeon operated on a 12-year-old girl, a routine appendectomy. He made a mistake during the procedure. She bled out on the table, and I'd said nothing. I'd known he was impaired, and I'd said nothing because I was afraid for my career. "That wasn't your fault," I said gently. "Wasn't it? I took an oath to do no harm, to advocate for patients. I failed that child because I chose silence over courage. I've carried that weight every day since. When I moved to Canada and rebuilt my career, I promised myself I would never make that mistake again. No matter the cost to me personally, I would speak up when I saw something wrong. So when I heard that conversation outside David's room, when I saw the pressure tactics and the rushed timeline, I knew I couldn't walk away. Not again. If I was wrong, I'd face embarrassment. But if I was right and said nothing, I'd be complicit in another death. David reached across the table and gripped his shoulder. "You saved my life, Dr. Patel. That little girl would be proud of the doctor you became." The old man's eyes glistened with tears. "I like to think so. But mostly, I'm just grateful I was in the right place at the right time, and that your sister had the courage to listen to an interfering old man instead of signing those papers. Trust but verify," I said. "That's what my mother always taught us." Linda was counting on me being too grief-stricken to think clearly, but something about the whole situation felt wrong. When you confirmed those instincts, it gave me permission to stand my ground. The evening ended with laughter and stories, 3 people bound together by circumstances that none of us would have chosen, but that had revealed the best in all of us. A year after the accident, David and I stood in that same hospital, but this time for a happier reason. Riverside Medical Center, under new management, was dedicating a wing to patient advocacy and ethics. Dr. Patel was being honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award for his decades of service and his courage in exposing the organ trafficking ring. During his acceptance speech, he looked out at the crowd of doctors, nurses, and hospital staff and said something I'll never forget. "Medicine is not just science, it's trust. Patients trust us with their lives, their bodies, their most vulnerable moments. When we betray that trust for money, convenience, or ego, we betray the very foundation of our profession. But trust isn't blind. Patients and families should always feel empowered to ask questions, seek second opinions, and advocate for themselves or their loved ones. And medical professionals must create an environment where that advocacy is welcomed, not punished. The Thornton case taught me that after 42 years in medicine, I'm still learning, still growing, still trying to be worthy of the trust my patients place in me." The room erupted in applause. David squeezed my hand, and I squeezed back. Later, at the reception, a young woman approached me nervously. She introduced herself as Rachel, the daughter of one of the organ trafficking victims. Her father had been declared brain dead 3 years earlier after a stroke, and his organs had been quickly harvested. "I always felt like something was wrong," she told me, tears streaming down her face. "They rushed us so much, wouldn't let us get a second opinion, said we were being selfish, keeping Dad on machines when he could save lives. I signed the papers because I felt guilty. And then I found out the truth, that he was murdered for money, that his organs didn't even go to save lives on the transplant list, but to rich people who paid under the table. It's destroyed me, knowing I signed away my father's life." I hugged her, this stranger bound to me by shared trauma. "You didn't know. You were pressured and manipulated by people who should have protected him. The guilt belongs to them, not to you. Your story gave me hope," she said. "Knowing that someone stood up, someone questioned, someone saved their loved one. It doesn't bring my dad back, but it means his death led to changes. No one else has to go through what we did." That's what I hold on to, even now. David's near death, as horrifying as it was, exposed a system that needed fixing. 7 families got justice for their loved ones. Protocols changed nationwide. Hospitals became more vigilant about brain death declarations and organ donation consent. And I learned something profound about courage. It's not always loud and dramatic. Sometimes courage is a 70-year-old doctor quietly saying, "Wait 24 hours." Sometimes it's refusing to sign papers when everyone is pressuring you. Sometimes it's trusting your instincts even when they make you seem difficult or unreasonable. My brother lived because several people chose courage in small moments. Dr. Patel chose to interfere when it would have been easier to walk away. Nurse Patricia chose to guard his room with fierce dedication. Dr. Chen chose to drive from Hamilton on her day off to provide a second opinion, and I chose to listen to that voice in my head saying something wasn't right. Trust your instincts. That's the lesson I carry forward. When something feels wrong, it often is. When people pressure you to make quick decisions about irreversible matters, slow down, ask questions, demand answers. Seek second opinions. Don't let guilt or fear or authority push you into choices you're not ready to make. And if you're a medical professional reading this, please remember that your patients are people, not procedures. Their families are not obstacles to efficiency. When someone questions your judgment or asks for more time, respond with patience and transparency, not defensiveness. The vast majority of families aren't being difficult. They're being protective of people they love. Honor that. Welcome it. Medicine at its best is a partnership between skilled professionals and informed, empowered patients. When that partnership breaks down, when trust is betrayed, people die. But when it works, when doctors and families collaborate with honesty and respect, lives are saved. My brother is alive today because good people chose to do the right thing, even when it was difficult, because an elderly doctor decided that one more person's life was worth the risk to his comfortable retirement. Because courage comes in many forms, and sometimes the quietest whisper saves a life. Don't rush life and death decisions. Listen to the people who tell you to slow down and think. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, and never underestimate the power of asking one more question, waiting one more day, or simply saying, "No, I need more time." Those choices might save a life. They saved my brother's, and they might save yours.